All right, we're about to trace a line that's 200 years long. It starts with an idea that basically created the modern world. And, it ends with a technology that some people think could destroy it. This is the wild journey from human computers all the way to killer robots. So let's actually start at the end of our story. This thing you're looking at, it's a robowolf. Yeah, an armed, four-legged combat drone that was just unveiled by China's military. And get this, it's designed to work in packs. This is the absolute cutting edge of what automation on the battlefield looks like today. And this, well, this is basically its great-great-great-great-grandfather. It's a piece of Charles Babbage's difference engine, a purely mechanical calculator from almost 200 years ago. The gap between these two machines, it's not just about time, it's a massive, fundamental shift in what we even expect our technology to do. Okay, to really get that shift, you have to know what the word computer originally meant. Because for centuries, a computer wasn't a thing at all. It was a person. It was literally a job title for someone who just did calculations all day long. So when you think about it, the entire history of computing is really the story of automating that person's job right out of existence. And that brings us right to our first chapter, from humans to hardware. This whole quest to replace the human computer, it really started with one guy's obsession with a very, very human problem: mistakes. That guy's name was Charles Babbage. And back in the 1820s, he was just completely fed up with the logarithmic tables they were using. See, they were all calculated by those human computers, and they were just riddled with mistakes. And in an age of sailing, a tiny little error in a navigation table could get you shipwrecked. It could be a total disaster. So his solution? A massive, steam-powered, gear-driven machine that could do the math perfectly, every single time. Now, Babbage never actually finished that machine, but his next idea, the analytical engine, was even more mind-blowing. He came up with a mill for processing, that's basically a CPU. He designed a store to hold numbers, that's our memory, like RAM, and a reader for input. I mean, it's just astonishing. The basic blueprint for every single computer we use today was born way back in the 1830s. And of course, if you have hardware, you're going to need software, right? Well, enter Ada Lovelace. She was translating a paper about the analytical engine, but she didn't just translate it. She added her own extensive notes, and in those notes was what we now recognize as the world's very first computer program. Just let that sink in for a second. She wrote a working algorithm for a revolutionary computer that hadn't even been built yet. Just incredible. So, as amazing as they were, Babbage's mechanical dreams were just way, way too far ahead of their time. It would actually take a world war to finally push his vision from clunky gears into the realm of electricity. And that brings us to our second chapter, the digital dawn. Yeah, World War II was the real catalyst here. In 1943, you get ENIAC, built to calculate artillery tables, a job Babbage would have absolutely loved. Then, boom, just 8 years later in 51, the UNIVAC is the first computer ever sold commercially. And only 3 years after that, IBM is already mass-producing its Model 650. Think about that. In a little over a decade, the computer went from a top-secret military project to a commercial product you could buy. The pace was just staggering. But we've got to remember, these early machines were absolute behemoths. We're not talking about desktops. ENIAC weighed 50 tons. It filled an entire room with 18,000 glowing vacuum tubes. Back then, the idea that this kind of tech could one day fit in your pocket or, walk around on 4 legs, that was just complete science fiction. And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen the general history, so now let's jump back to the modern battlefield. It's time to talk about the robowolves. Believe it or not, these machines are already being integrated into Chinese infantry units. In recent military drills, they've actually been seen moving across really rugged terrain, scouting ahead of human soldiers, and even engaging targets. So just to be clear, this isn't some lab experiment. This is active field testing. And their whole tactical role is inspired by, well, a real wolf pack. You'll have some units acting as the scouts, identifying targets, and then others armed with assault rifles will move in to carry out precision strikes. So the point here isn't about one robot, it's about a coordinated team that works together. But their power isn't just about the hardware. As one Chinese military expert pointed out, there's a huge psychological impact here. I mean, how do you fight an enemy that feels zero fear, no pain, and just keeps advancing no matter what? A big part of the goal is to demoralize the human soldiers on the other side before a single shot is even fired. Okay, that's a pretty intimidating vision for sure, but it's really important that we separate the current reality from all the futuristic hype. So let's take a look at where the science fact ends and the science fiction kind of begins, at least for now. So for all their cool tricks, these robowolves still has some massive hurdles. Battery life, that's a huge one. They can't carry really heavy loads, and here's a critical point. They can't reload their own weapons. Plus, just adding the weight of a rifle and all that ammo drains their power even faster. A US service member who tested similar systems really put it perfectly. This whole battery life thing, it's not just some technical glitch. When you're in a combat zone, it is a life or death problem.
And these limitations, they really help explain the different strategies we're seeing pop up around the world. So while China seems to be pushing really hard on these ground-based robo-wolves, the US and its allies are, for now at least, putting most of their money into autonomous systems in the air and at sea.
But let's be honest, these technical problems, they're going to get solved eventually. And that forces us to face the biggest, most difficult ethical question of all. What happens when these machines become fully autonomous? Well, according to one veteran defense analyst, Francis Tusa, we are right in the middle of a new arms race. He's warning that China is developing these AI-powered systems at a, quote, dizzying rate, and that they could actually be on the battlefield in just a few years. We're not talking decades here. And what makes this arms race so incredibly dangerous is that there are no rules, zero regulation. All the attempts to create international laws to govern killer robots have just completely stalled out. And here's the catch. The very countries that are leading the charge in developing them, the US, China, Russia, they're the same ones blocking any and all attempts to control. This whole situation is leading to some incredibly stark warnings. I mean, listen to this. Steve Goose from Human Rights Watch argues that fully autonomous weapons pose a threat on the same level as nuclear war and climate change. He's putting it up there as one of the greatest dangers to the actual survival of humankind. So, let's tie this all back together. We've gone from a dream of perfect, flawless calculation, all the way to a machine designed for perfect, flawless lethality. 200 years ago, Charles Babbage just wanted to take human error out of doing math. Today, the goal is to take the human entirely out of the decision to kill. The whole journey started by automating the job of the human computer. And the fundamental question this technology is forcing us to ask now is, what part of being human are we going to automate next?